The cartels had had a shootout the night before. My sister was traveling, caravanning out for safety reasons. Her brother-in-law comes to pick up the broken down vehicle, and he sees smoke. And he turned around and he said, "They're all gone." Having gone through all the things I've gone through, when I think of Christ and I think of what he did for us, he knows more than we could ever know. There's no amount of heartache that you can bring to him or shame that you can bring to him that doesn't know. It's like, I know. I truly, truly know.
Yellow fingered from your cigarettes. Your hands are shaking while your body sweats. Why don't you look into Jesus? He got the answer.
Welcome to the next episode of Why God. We're excited. We've got a guest, Ryan. Why don't you introduce our guest today?
Thanks, Eric. So I'm very excited to introduce Adriana. I was going to try and roll the tongue, but I was practicing earlier and it wasn't working. So just Adriana Jones. And Adriana, we've been friends on Facebook. We have a lot of friends in common, and she just has this incredible harrowing story. And so it's a real honor, and I know that gets used a lot, but it's truly an honor to be able to share this time with her and be able to get a hero of mine's perspective. And I don't say that lightly because traditionally we all have heroes, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, but a hero to me is somebody that has gone through it and gone through an incredible amount of grief, maybe some depression, and come out the other side and shows light and laughter and chose to be intentional with her family. And I just think that takes so much courage to just get up in the morning and be there for others. And so without further ado, Adriana Jones, say hello to the Why God audience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here on your podcast, Ryan. And thank you for the opportunity to share my story, maybe.
That's terrific. So I'm trying to figure out how to start this. And I'm just gonna do some broad strokes and then we can kind of get into the details. But basically what I've learned, you hear things on the news about the Mexican cartel, and you hear, policy, and you hear, they're potential terrorists and they're taking over the border. But I think that a lot of that gets glazed over, and we don't really see the gravity of what it's really about. And then learning Adriana's story, it was just like incredible, breathtaking, and it was also very evil and dire, and it's just um, the gravity of it is almost more weight than I can bear because it's just unthinkable evil. And so what happened was Adriana's sister was living down in Mexico, and she got contacted by they were going on a trip, and basically the drug cartel in Mexico. I don't know for what reason, but they decided to completely execute, and it was a massacre, not only Adriana's sister, but her sister's children, babies, a 12-year-old boy named Howard, a 10-year-old girl named Crystal, and the twins, Titus and Tiana. And it's just like, that's unthinkable. Like we can't comprehend it. So, that being said, Adriana, maybe you can just share a little bit about the ones you lost, and then we can kind of get into the story. Um, I think it'd be appropriate to honor them by remembering like maybe your favorite story of each one of them or your favorite memory. And then she was kind enough to send some pictures over, so Eric's going to launch those.
Yeah, yeah. Real quick, Adriana, just a little bit about you. Where are you located?
So I live in Utah.
Okay.
I'm a mom. I have 6 kids, kind of more stay at home until the massacre. Now I run our nonprofit, Rhonita Vive. It means Rhonita lives. Rhonita was my sister's name. Well, is my sister's name. And we just access to justice for victims of cartel violence and organized crime. And we have a sister foundation in Mexico. And we are doing everything in our power to shed some light on what's going on to help other families who have been through what we've been through and maybe don't have the same resources we do to go after, to find a way through. We have had an incredible amount of support from our communities, from our families, and we just want to be able to offer that to other people that we know. It's happening every single day. So I tell people, as devastating as it is, I'm here. I take time away from my babies because, 200 fentanyl poisonings because of the cartels every day, 100 murders on average every single day in Mexico. So you think 300 families, like while we were preparing for this podcast and this time that we've been here, that's 300 families that have to feel that heartache. How does the world even recover, right, from that much daily heartache? How do you rise above it? So we're just kind of trying to do everything we can to see if we can get those numbers to go down.
Yeah. And when did this happen?
November 4th of 2019. So my
Wow.
sister was traveling. She wasn't in the same vehicle with the other two women. They were kind of caravanning out for safety reasons. Violence and cartel violence had escalated, not to the extent of what happened to my sister. I don't think we ever could have imagined something that horrific, but just kind of shakedowns and little things that kind of left you nervous. And the cartels had had a shootout the night before. A lot of people think that somehow they were caught in between, on two sides on either side, or they were involved in some way. And it's not the case at all. What's happening in Mexico is they were told to hold that road. They'd had a shootout. They went into the mountains and it just didn't matter. They for sure knew that they were women and children. Christina, who we now believe was the first vehicle, Christina and Donna were the two mothers that were in the vehicles a few miles ahead of my sister. So they were the last to be found, but we believe now that Christina was actually the first to be murdered. She got out of her vehicle. She was found outside of her vehicle, like had gotten out, shown the cartels that she was a woman, and they shot her anyways. Her baby Faith was the only other one in the vehicle. She survived, but she had bullet holes in her car seat. Perfectly okay. Was left on the mountain for over 8 hours. My mom and my family were actually, when the government wouldn't respond, wouldn't show up, despite having heard about it at 10:30 in the morning, my family's from a community 3 hours away from this one, and they got a whole group together and went up there. They ended up being the first responders and the ones who found baby Faith alive. Everybody had thought she had also died at that point. Donna and her children, two boys that were killed with her, but she had 7 surviving children in there that were all bullet ridden. That she had come on when they came up the road and they saw Christina outside of the vehicle, they started trying to back up. And they started just open fire on her vehicle. Reports came out that when a story was told later on that when one of the cartel people said they saw all the little heads and saw that they were kids, and they tried to shoot to miss, but they knew if they didn't shoot that they would also be shot. So this is something that was reported. So two boys, we're talking bullet wounds to the one little boy's whole jaw was hanging off, chest wounds, foot wounds, arm wounds. It's devastating. So these kids actually tried to make it home. At first they sat there waiting, and when hours passed by and nobody had shown up, they decided to try to walk. And when they were walking home, when I heard this testimony in court, it broke my heart. Well, how do you carry all these wounded children, right? And they said, well, we would take Xavier and we would walk 20 feet and set them down. Imagine the bullet-ridden 4-year-old and the 2-year-old, right? And then go back for the other kid and carry them 40 feet and then go back. And they're just all these children, and their mom's dad and their siblings are dad. And they have to some way find their way back to their Miles home. So Devin, I always forget, I think he was 12 at the time. And he was the only one that was uninjured. So some people died and some miraculously were uninjured. And he was the only one who didn't receive a bullet. And so he started walking to try to make his way home. And he said there were still gunfire. People were shooting at him even as he made his way home. He ended up kind of following the river. And he didn't make it back. The news of this came out at like 10:30, 11 a.m. in the morning. And he didn't make it back until closer to 5 p.m. That's how long he was up in those. His sister and the rest of the children were hiding like in a little ravine there, and he had gone back for help. He had taken so long that they ended up sending 9-year-old Mackenzie, who was like, she had a gunshot but to her arm, and she started walking to try to go find help. And so when he finally arrives back at the house, that's when they knew Nita had been murdered closer to home. So Nita's was the first, my sister was the first news that had come out, but they had not known what happened to the other woman until that moment. So my sister's vehicle was closer, it had broken down. So the other women took off without her. And she had given her a ride back to the house. She got another Suburban, and she had, you know, transferred all the stuff over and started her trip, but she was behind the other women. And so hers was closer to home. And so her brother-in-law comes to pick up the broken down vehicle, and he sees smoke coming up. So he goes to see what's happening, and he sees his mom's vehicle that she had borrowed, bullet ridden and on fire. But at this point, the explosion is too big to even get close enough to see. So I was in Victoria. My husband and I were on an anniversary trip up there. And we were just walking around, and we got this news, and it was like 10:30 in the morning. And Dustin just said, I'm like, what? He looked worried, and he tells me, there's just something about Nita. I don't know. Let me go out and listen and see, and then I'll let you know. So he walked out, and the first news was just that the vehicle was bullet ridden and on fire. So in my mind, I'm thinking that they've been kidnapped, right? Still horrified, you know, thinking of little Crystal, thinking of my sister, thinking of the kids, of what they're going to do to them. I'm thinking kidnapping, and I'm so shooken up. We had our plane had been delayed that morning because of fog, the little seaplanes, and we were going to go back and try to get out of there and get on the plane. And we were walking on the street, and Dustin he must have had a sixth sense about it or something, because he walked like 10 feet in front of me and was listening to the messages. And he turned around and he said, they're all gone. They're all burned. Like they're gone. I just fell to the floor. I was so, I tell people all the time, it's like the before and the after. That moment is like that moment where your entire life changes. Like it's such an impossible thing to happen. It doesn't seem like, you know, you expect to lose people, car accidents is sad, or cancer, you know, you think of all the ways that you might, you know, lose a person, but this just didn't feel possible. I was so shocked. And Dustin so in Mexico, everybody uses WhatsApp. So everyone has their family WhatsApp groups. And so all the messages were coming through as fast as, you know, it could. At this moment, they have no idea what happened to the other two women and the children. Everybody's just in turmoil. The entire government, the entire country of Mexico knows. We're trying to get help, but Dustin tells me, he said, babe, your parents are going to La Mora, and I don't think they should go. It's dangerous. We have no idea what happened. Like, they can't, you need to call and tell your dad not to go. And I said, okay. So I get on the phone and I tell him, Dad, don't go. I don't want you to go. And he said, sweetheart, I'm going to get my daughter. Like, I'm going to get my daughter. If you want to pray for me, but I'm going to get my daughter. It's 3 hours away. They got in a vehicle, and I got on the phone with my mom, and she said, nobody's coming to save us, sweetheart. Everybody, the entire state has known for hours. Those kids are up there. We have no idea what's happening to them. We're going. There's no right to bear arms in Mexico. There's no way to protect yourself there. But they got a whole group together, and they drove up there. They were held back by Mexican military at checkpoints and everything. And we now believe it's just all part of that collusion with the cartels and the Mexican government, you know, giving the cartels a chance to get out of there and get away. But they were the first responders. My mom said that at that point, David Langford, who's Donna's husband, so those are his two boys that were died up on the hill as well, the mountain. They had met at some point. He was coming down from Arizona and my mom and them were coming. And so that caravan had all kind of gone in together to go be like first responders to see what was happening. And that they were in the vehicle together at the moment that Devin arrived home and told them what happened to Christina, what happened to his mom and his two siblings. So she said she experienced, that father's grief when he actually knew. At that point, they suspected it had been so many hours without communication. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But so when they arrived on the scene, and Christina's body was still there, and Donna and the boys, but when they got in the truck and saw that Faith was alive, they couldn't believe, like nobody had even known that she was alive. They handed her to my mom. She said that she wasn't even crying anymore. Like she probably exhausted her. I mean, 8 hours, a little baby, completely wet through, soaked through, but she didn't even have a voice. And nobody has a bottle or anything. She said that somebody had electrolytes and she was giving her like little capfuls just to the amount of dehydration that the poor little girl had probably been through. And she said that they were obviously just seeing the bodies in the morning and David and his wife and his boys, but that's when they walked up to him and they told him that Mackenzie was missing, that she had gone for help, but she was missing. She wasn't with the other children anymore and she didn't get to the house. And my mom said you could see the shift in him from total devastation to I gotta go save my daughter now. So he was actually the one who understood enough of the terrain because he lives there to say, do you know what? You can see the lights of this town from the mountain pass, but you can't see the lights of our hometown. I wonder if she went that way. And that's where they ended up finding her. And of course, the first thing she said was, take me back. We have to go back for the other kids. We have to go back. A little 9-year-old, it's just, gunshot wound. She was missing a shoe because she'd thrown it at a snake. Like,
Oh,
I'm telling you, the stories they're almost, you feel like if you couldn't write about them.
right.
They're worse than something you would read in a story. You just think that this can't be actual reality, right? This isn't really what happened. And honestly, it's just my mom sat there with Nita and the kids' bodies. There was so much going on and so much like emergency aid everywhere. And the forensic team just didn't show up for more than 24 hours after, the incident. And my mom sat there with them. She would talk to them. Imagine they're all burned. My sister's in there, my nephew, my sister's vehicle was back, but my nephew was half out of the vehicle. Little Crystal was in the very back seat, but she was in a fetal position, like completely fetal position, hiding. And then the twins were in their car seats. And I don't know. The amount of courage my mom, like whenever anybody tells us, like, well, where are you guys? How are you so resilient? I'm like, well, you should meet this mother I have. She's incredible. And she did. But I was telling Ryan that, so when the forensic team finally shows up, she said they showed up with like garbage bags to take their remains. And she was like, absolutely not. Like, if you put my daughter in there, there won't be anything left to bury. And they sent back to Nita's mother-in-law's home and asked, what do you guys have? Like, let's do better. And they got bins and sheets and honestly, like the sieve from the kitchen and the painter's brush from the craft cupboard. And my mom said, no, we're going to do better than this. This is just not okay. And so they had all of their bodies in like individual bins and covered. So when I showed up the next day to the Nita's mother-in-law's home, they had like the viewings were going to be in like this house in the back. She had like a little apartment in the back of her home, right? A separate building. And the bodies were all covered with like blankets. And my brother-in-law, Doug, had asked, for some private time with the family. Obviously, I have a huge family. We're all in there together, but it was just my dad's family, my siblings, all of us. And he said, so this is going to be, we need to put their bodies in their coffins. And it's the most horrific thing you guys will ever see in your life. And I don't recommend it. I think everybody should leave. But she's your sister, and you have the right to be here if you want to be here. And we all stayed. And Nita was first, and when they uncovered her body, my first thought was, my Nita. It was like, my Nita, but it was mostly just torso and her lungs. The lungs like are a thicker muscle, you know, in her torso that was left. And I remember putting my heart on her lungs because that felt like the most complete part of her, and just being like, I'm so sorry, Nita. I'm so sorry. I just, more than her dying, to me as a mother, the fact that she had to die knowing that that was happening to her babies and there was nothing she could do about it. You can't die worse than that. There is no death worse than knowing that what you're going through, your babies are going through, and that my sweet Nita had to die that way is almost more than I can bear. Still more than I can bear. And it's just like, I was just so sorry that like we could live with the loss, but that she had to go that way. We put her body in her coffin, and we would say prayers each time. Like, so when it was her body in, we took a moment and said a prayer for her, you know? And then we did the twins, and the twins were still, like, they were burned, but they were still complete. Like, you could see their little eye sockets, and like you could still kind of see that we actually like swaddled them and laid them each next to Nina in her coffin and said prayers for Titus, and then said a prayer for Tiana. And then next was Crystal. And that's why I tell you her body was in a full fetal position. But it was cute. Dustin, and all of a sudden my husband Dustin, he said, what is that? And it was the brightest pink piece of leather, like just like tucked underneath her arm. Like somehow it just survived the fire. And all of a sudden everybody goes, it's her purse. This little girl from like 1 year old on, you don't see her without a purse. And not like a tiny cute little girl's purse, like one of her mom's purses. Like she carried a purse everywhere she went, and she's 10 now. And the second, I think one of my sisters said, it's her purse. And we all burst out laughing. I'm crying, sobbing. And it was just, I don't know, just 1,000 little beautiful moments. Howie was the most complete because he'd been half out of the vehicle. He'd actually tried to escape the vehicle. And so, just the growing boy was probably going to be over 6 feet tall like his dad. It just, so I know that it sounds morbid, but I'm so grateful that I got to say goodbye to my sister. And Dustin and I have talked about it so many times, how like you're there at births or different moments, like when you feel like the veil is lifted and you've never been closer to God than in that moment, right? Like it is so spiritual, and it is so real, and it is so raw to hold their remains and to love them and to honor them in exactly the way they died. And it felt like just a spiritual moment, honestly. And I'm so grateful that I was able to actually tell her goodbye.
What, Adriana, that unbelievable, the evil. I don't even know what to say. I'm curious about your faith, like leading up to this. You know, have you always been a believer in Christ? Tell me a little bit about your background with your relationship with God.
So I grew up in a fundamentalist family. My dad is a polygamist, and there are 39 children. My mom had 12. And so my parents they're fundamentalists, but you think of like this super fanatic upbringing, right? Thinking like we prayed all day and, you know, just, but they actually weren't like that, as weird as it seems. My parents are super intellectual readers. Like, if we prayed, it was up to us. If we wanted to go to church, it was up to us. You know, we weren't raised like on this tight-knit, like controlled family. I always say that my parents said, well, this is what we believe, but you have to go find God for yourself. And so I grew up in a family that always talked a lot about religion, but it wasn't like imposed on me per se. So I grew up with God always, and I've always felt I had a really strong connection with God. Once I got married, Dustin and I were kind of probably more agnostic, I would say. Like as a family, as a choice, we never went to church. We went down the whole, is there a God? Is there not a God? We read all the books. We just kind of, I did all the philosophy of religion classes, went to, Muslim services and Jewish services and Catholic ones, and really felt that I felt that I had already reached a very comfortable place in my relationship with God, but my relationship with religion and in general, where I felt that I was super close to God, but didn't really need religion. Or I guess I kind of always looked at religion as being a little bit more, well, if that's what you need to be a better person, go you. That's fine, but you do or you don't. No. So when I had my kids, so I have six. So when I had like three little girls all at once, I started to kind of feel that itch of like, well, I came to this place with God. How will they find God? Like if I don't have enough God in my home and in our lives, like, you know, they're going to be susceptible to anybody who comes their way. Like I need to expose them enough to where they know God and they can go find him when they need him, I guess.
Mhm.
And we kind of did. We went to a few Christian churches, and to kind of see and fill them out, and never really found our place in any of them, and didn't delve that deep. I mean, maybe got a little bit more spiritual for a second. But like I said, I was always a learner, so I've always loved religion and the philosophy of religion. But I just felt a little bit more comfortable with cherry picking, like what I found beautiful in all of them, I guess, was where my faith was. And I thought I was good. Like that I didn't need more than that. Um, I even I tell this story and it's funny because you feel that shame and that embarrassment that, well, if you need it, it's religion's a crutch. I remember using
Mhm.
that term. And now I look at it in that moment and I can almost just see Christ looking at me like, like you look at your kid when they're full of it, but you're not going to call them out because life's going to show them soon enough.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to call your kid out. I could just like, I still think I'm like, can you imagine Christ knowing all that was in store for me? And be like, it's okay.
Right.
You just keep on your journey. It's fine. And so it was actually my husband Dustin, but I think it was probably 10 months after the massacre. So obviously it's hard to say because I leaned so into God through it all. Like I felt there wasn't a choice that I made that where I don't, okay, like, is this of you? Am I saying the right thing? Is this of your purpose? Like just guide me. So I never didn't feel that I was connected. But so 10 months later, Dustin tells me, I think we should try church again. I think we need this in our family. I think we really need to try. And I was like, okay, well, let's go for it. But once again, I felt like I was more doing it for my family and doing it I didn't feel I had more to gain, I guess.
Mm.
So I always say that one of the only things that I didn't like about Christianity, that I struggled with, um, was their hyper focus on sin. I felt like they were too hyper focused on sin. And I was like, why is it so much about sin? Like, aren't we trying to be our best person? Like, where's this hyper focus, right? So I started going to church. And I say it's funny because the thing that I really did not like is what finally made me go all in. Because when I understood that sin is just the part that makes you human, right? That we're all just human. It's just another word for being human.
Mm.
Because being human means that you will sin. Like we are all sinners because we will sin and he will love us
Mm.
anyways. And that sin is innate. And that's why he had to come. That's why he had to be present and to really live in this life to show us that it was okay to find the way, that perfect person, that one perfect person that you could depend on, right? And so I was like, okay, I think I get this. I think I found that little thing that was different. And the more I searched and the more I've like journeyed on that path, the more validation I guess I found for it within myself. No, it's just true. It's just, nope, that's why you had to come. I was telling Ryan earlier that having gone through all the things I've gone through, when somebody who's been through really hard things hugs you, you know, like you
Mm.
feel differently from that person. They know, they don't empathize, they don't feel bad, they know.
Yeah.
And so when I think of Christ and I think of what he did for us, and he knows more than we could ever know. There's no amount of heartache that you can bring to him or shame that you could bring to him that he doesn't know. It's like, I know, I truly, truly know. And I think that that's kind of what made me go all in. It was,
That progression is so common though, and you said you feel embarrassed, but you shouldn't because we all start there and then we try to let's almost make it about us where we want to feel comfortable and we want things to go the way we think they ought to go. And then as you progress, as you did, you start to realize you almost escape the religion and the law and the rules of it, and then you get that relationship with Christ, and then everything kind of opens up from there. So you don't need like the dogma of hardcore religion through works, and you have to do this, you have to do this, and you can never measure up. But once you have that relationship like you discovered with Christ and you understand that he knows and he understands everything, I think that's you're definitely headed in the right direction. So I think that's incredible. So thank you for sharing that.
no, thank you. Yeah, I have a long way to go, but we are, but at the same time, it's just, you don't, because you're like, okay, it's all just
Mhm.
beautiful. I don't know. Like, I feel like I will search and study and read forever, but there's
Yeah.
also a lot of peace too. So you're just like, no, that
That's it. You're always learning perpetually, and for that reason, it always feels new. It never feels old. Yeah. What do you think, Eric? What's your experience?
Yeah, yeah. No, mine's a little bit different because I grew up in the church and I actually had to unwind a lot of that baggage, Adriana, that you were talking about because the focus was always sin, right? And one time somebody explained it to me where, if you're just focused on your sin, right? And you're focused on it, of course, that's all you're going to think about. And then when you finally, I mean, I'm just thinking about your life, when you finally look at Christ and you start aiming towards Christ, the sin dissipates and becomes dim, right? You don't think about it, you don't dwell on it. You're focused on your relationship on Christ, and that's where you start to feel the peace and the joy and just
And the inspiration, right?
totally.
And then
And it
with that,
changes.
and then inadvertently with that inspiration, you just inadvertently stop sinning or you stop doing it. You stop
Yeah.
struggling with what you're struggling with. So
If
it turns everything inside out.
I'll tell you how to turn somebody to sin, have them focus on their sin.
Yeah.
I do. No,
Yeah.
but there is something when you, like I said, I kept studying, and the more I study about his life, which was always more, I always loved Christ, but the more I learn about just the way he was and what a phenomena he was to the entire world, because the
Right.
world has never seen anything like this human and has never seen this, and obviously because he wasn't, but they were like, no, has to be the real deal. Like, this is just too, he's just too perfect. He's just too, um, but I do think that there is something beautiful. And even for my kids, once again, it's what drew me, but for them to just know. Like I said, when I see Christ, my feeling is that it's going to be this moment of, you have this list of all your shame and your doubts and your hurt and your pain and your baggage, and then it just dissolves. And it's just, give me a hug. I loved you all. Like, why were you so
Right.
That's
hard?
right. That's right. So this
Eric,
was after this all in, like you described it, was after this whole ordeal, right?
Yeah, so it was
And
like 10 months later, I would say, about, yeah.
okay. Yeah. And I know you have some pictures you want to share. So I'm gonna share that now if I cannot mess this up here. Give me just a minute.
which is why I gave the reins to Eric because
The
I turned
blind
into
leading
my
the blind
mom.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Becky stuff. Well, there's Nita and her husband Howard at a wedding in Cancun. I love her smile. That's why I did
Yeah.
the photo.
What I don't think I heard. What were they doing in Mexico?
We lived there. They lived there. This
Okay.
happened miles from her home. She wasn't in some random place. It's just
Yeah.
How
Were,
far
were they?
south? Yeah, how far south is it in into Mexico?
so I can't even remember the exact mileage, but as the crows fly, right on the border, basically, like not
Oh,
far away. And then obviously the roads, you have to take this loop-de-loop to get to the border, but it's just very, very close. So this isn't Sonora. I'm not from Sonora. I grew up in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. So it's a neighboring state, but my sister Nita had married someone that lived in Sonora. So that's where,
Oh, so you grew up in Mexico?
yeah. There are
Okay.
a lot of Mormon kind of colonies. They predate the Revolutionary War down there when, early Mormons were still like sending families, to California, to Mexico, to Canada, and
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, and I'm from those colonies down there.
Got it.
Yep, I love this one. So obviously with the twins being so little, I only met them once. I had gone down for the summer. They were born in March, and I had gone to Mexico in the summer and hung out, for a week with Nita and the kids and everyone. And then, they were all murdered in November. But it's so cute. We always say we're just grateful for iPhones. So we just shared pictures all day, still got to talk and videos. And so it makes you feel like at least you got more of them than you would have otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at those eyes. They're so cute. Oh,
So this is Howard on the right, the Calic. So he was Nita's oldest. So Nita left 3 orphans behind as well that were not in the vehicle with her. But Howard was her oldest, and Nita was the sweet sister in my family by far. We would tease her about it because she just did not have a mean bone in her body. We have a cousin of mine had died a couple years before Nita, and I remember us teasing Nita on the group chat because they say only the good die young, right? And we were like, Nita, you need to go out and do something really mean. And she's like, I'm not that nice, guys. I'm like, nope, you are. Go out and do something to rob a bank. So Nita's son was like her. So Nita's husband, Howard, is like maybe not sweet, but a very easygoing person. And then Nita's the sweetest person you've ever met. So Howie Jr. was like the most easygoing, sweet kid because
Mm.
he was both, even his friends said that when I wrote the eulogies, I had the kids that were their age, like all their cousins just tell stories. And I said, don't tell me what to write. I'm just gonna write like what I hear from your guys' words. And it was unanimous. They were like, the kid couldn't even swear. He was just
Mm.
a sweet, sweet boy.
Mhm.
And that's him FaceTiming. I think that's actually the night before.
Oh, oh.
So this kid would get up, like milk the cows, and then help his mom with the younger kids. Like the kid was
Oh,
just
that was my last conversation with Nita because she said um, that she finally realized that she's the reason they're always late. But it's not her kids. Because she's like, no, all of a sudden I'm like yelling, and why haven't you guys done that? And Crystal's like, Howie already went and milked the cat, did all of his chores, and he's up, and all the kids are lined up at the door. Mom, you're the one who's taking too long. It was cute. And she's like, I just can't believe how big he's growing and how adorable he is. That 100% the last conversation I had with her, that's what we were talking about. And
Wow.
and look at those beautiful babies.
I know.
And this was the night before?
Yeah, so this was actually, if I could be mistaken, but the way I understand this photo is he was playing an online video game with one of my other nephews that was in Chihuahua. And they were like, my sister came and said, you guys have to go to bed. No. And Howie said, well, we're leaving. Like, can't we just finish really quick, Aunt Leanne? And that was the last time she heard his voice. And yeah, so.
Wow. Mm, mm.
And then Crystal, who was going to be a supermodel, you can tell now. Her dad's super tall, and my sister, they're really tall and lean. So this girl was, I'm telling you, they were the sweetest kids, but she wanted to be a writer. She had a whole little book series, like all written out and drawn, and all 15 little books, all Oh, she told her grandma she wanted to be an author, and her grandma told her, "Well, honey, you already are."
Oh, that's sweet.
She was a sweet one.
Hmm.
Man,
Yeah.
that's her with the twins.
Yep.
Wow. Mm,
I don't have too many of the living children. I've gotten in the habit of not always, since they're alive, it's a little bit more of a privacy respect thing, as the families move on. So, but
yeah.
I am realizing I didn't include a family one. But so she
Mm.
left behind uh let's see, Tristan would have been 8 at the time, and I'm trying to think, 5 years ago he just turned 14. Yeah, so, and then Amaryllis would have been 6. And then no, 5 and 3, 8, 5 and 3. That's how old they were at the time of the death. So Zach,
Wow.
a little boy, and then Amaryllis lost her 2 sisters and her mom, so she's the only girl left, and then Tristan.
Right.
Mm.
And it seems like every picture of these babies are just smiling and happy go lucky and
Mm.
Yeah, the joke always goes that Tiana was the sweet one and Titus was had to get breastfed first, had to get a fighter, and she
right.
was patient, but
That's
that
just the difference between men and women, right?
yeah, you're like, well, of course he's bigger than her. He took all.
And Adriana, is this what you were sharing with
Yeah,
us
so
on
that's
the, go ahead.
we put their bodies in the coffins. We would say a prayer over each one each time, and obviously this is one of the 3 different coffins that, like I said, I didn't know that picture existed. That's actually me up in the corner, but I didn't know anybody had snapped a photo until like a year later it popped up on my.
Uh, that's great.
So, Adriana, I asked you a question yesterday. I was hoping you could share it. I asked you if there was a difference between grieving and depression, and I thought your answer was profound. Could you share what you've come to understand about that?
Yeah, so to me, grief and depression are not the same thing, even though obviously depression can manifest from grief. But I feel that depression, you can get depression because you're overwhelmed. You can get depression for chemical reasons. You can get depression for 1,000 different things. It's not always grief. But grief is something, to me, it's something beautiful. It means all the love that you have. It means it's a story of that person. I always tell my kids, there's a little place right here in my heart, and this is just your part. Like nobody else gets to feel that. Just you, that one's for you. Well, it's the same for my sister and her children, right? So the grief is that part that you carry. So I think grief, if you love that much, and I even believe in the afterlife, right? That the relationship and how our souls are connected are through that love, right? And that grief and that loss, it's all the love that you want to give that person still. But I think you carry it forever. And it gets easier, but it gets easier because you get stronger, not because you love less or you miss less. It's because
Mm,
you as a person have worked that grief muscle a little more, and you're overcoming that, but you will carry that always. Depression is when you can't rise above. It's too much for you to carry in that moment, right? It's just you need to rest. Or so I think depression is the inability to I don't know, to fight your way through it, I guess. But I believe that if you lean into grief, one of the biggest things that we chose to do as a family, and imagine it's hard because you're talking about really violent death.
Yeah.
We chose to open wound healing, we call it, right? Like we weren't going to let it scar over, but we were going to let it heal from the inside out. We were not going to stop saying her name. We were not going to stop telling her stories. We were not going to hide from the children, not even her own children or our children, what happened. It's their story too. I remember my little son and daughter, and they were in the back of the car. And so they weren't talking to me, they were talking to each other. And he's like, but like if their clothes got burned on their bodies, are they naked when they go to heaven? You know? Then my older daughter was like, "Oh, their bodies are burned, stupid." Like, and then he's like, but I don't get it. And then her going, it's because it's not like it's your soul that goes to heaven. He's like, well, is that like your brain part? Well, no, it's your soul. You know, they're having this conversation, but they're 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds having conversations about the burn body and how, you know, but we felt if it was still their story, like let them come to terms with it gradually. Don't like try to pretend it didn't happen to them. They were going to know anyways, first of all. And they need
Yeah.
to know. They have to. So honoring that, but when we worked through that grief openly, we talked about her. I could it took a whole year for people to not just stop when I would say her name, because I would just say the story like if it was a normal story. She hadn't just been murdered in a massacre. I'm like, we're not going to stop telling her stories or bringing her up because it's uncomfortable for other people because of what happened to her. Like we're going to love her continuously and continue sharing. And I think it helped us a lot in that grief. It helped us kind of heal a little bit more authentically through the grief, even though there were just really hard moments, honestly. I can't say that there weren't, but I say it was really wonderful to have all my siblings. So they're having the same experience, having Dustin, right? Where it's like we're talking about it. And you think that when you're angry, I say the stages of grief and there's anger. So you think when you get to that stage, you're going to be like angry at the cartel, right? That you have a very clear person you're angry at. But that's not true. You're actually just an angry person.
Mm.
So you think that it's always going to manifest towards the right person, but you have to realize that your depression and your anger and all the stages of grief, they're going to manifest to the person that you love, to the person that you care about, to the they're just going to come up and you're just going to be a sad person or an angry person or like almost, you know, zombie person or and you don't realize that those are all the stages of grief playing through. It's usually not until you're, I think, kind of coming out of it that you look back and can kind of reflect, oh, but it really helped having my siblings and my family because they were going through the same thing. So we were able to kind of like share experiences and realize what we were going through.
So you've started a nonprofit as a result of this, Adriana. Tell us
Yes.
a little bit about that and when that, like how that transpired.
And we'll share the links too on all
Yeah.
everything so people can follow that and come to realize exactly what's going on out there.
Yeah, honestly, you don't know what you don't know. And then when you do, it's really hard not to try to do something to make a difference. Um, so we knew from day one that we weren't going to just the cartels, this is terrorism. The reason it's terrorism is because the cartels use this to keep everybody quiet, to get away with whatever they want, from government control to local police control. So, well, this can happen to you. If you say something, if you go after, if you seek justice, if you come after us, we're going to come after you, right? That's the status quo. And so as a family, when we said absolutely not, we will not stand by and pretend that this did not happen to Nita and the kids. We just can't. People tell my dad on a regular basis, well, why are you scared? Doesn't this make you a target? And he said, well, I can either pretend it didn't happen or I'm a target no matter what. So my activism makes me a bigger target. So be it. If I walked around like if this didn't happen, I'd be the Walking Dead anyways. I'd say I would lose my soul. Their life would be pointless. So my dad has become a full-time activist. He is very vocal on Mexican news media in the US as well, just shouting to the rooftops, this is what's happening. So as a family, we were like, hey, what can we do? You know, do we show up to schools and say no to drugs? Do we like where is our place in all of this? Well, we had within a month, had already filled out a petition to the United States government to have them Mexican drug cartels declared terrorists. The most, I call it God's work because we were inspired by him. It was the most naive, true, honest thing we could have ever done. Had no idea what a can of worms we were opening up by even asking for help. To us, this is not political. I mean, they're obviously terrorists. It became a huge political issue. We got a lot of backlash, but we held strong for 5 years. We said they are. And the entire world needs to declare them terrorists. We've been working the entire time. When Trump came into office in January and finally declared, not all of them are on the list, but declared cartels terrorists, it was a huge, huge win for us. It's finally, we feel like some changes are being made. But the form of the nonprofit, so we had shown up to a manifestation in Mexico City in early December 2nd of 2019. So this is, a month and a half after the massacre. And the president of Mexico was going to see us. And people were walking up to us on this, we were marching in this parade. And they would bring us like flyers and photos and handwritten letters of what had happened. My daughter disappeared. I haven't seen her again. The cartels came in, they killed my mom, my dad, my handicapped brother, they're taking over our ranch. I mean, my son disappeared, my son was murdered, my daughter was murdered. We just would get back to our hotel room with like stories, like our pockets filled with stories of people who'd gone through things like what we went through. And that's where the concept for Rhonita Viva kind of came from, was how could we help these families? Because we felt that we had, but we do have like a network. We have a huge, huge family network, a lot of support. And obviously, but we speak both languages, the education to kind of maybe do something, and to see all these families that have nowhere to turn or nowhere to go. So we decided to create the nonprofit. We do like pro bono legal services. We work with other coalitions like Madres Buscadoras. We've helped out with a lot of where it constantly changes. It's actually more organic than we realize, because the cases just come to us. Like we get the calls faster than we can't possibly feel the need that exists. We're just doing the best we can. But we have a team of lawyers in Mexico City. We are a fully founded 501c3 in the US, but we also fully founded the nonprofit in Mexico according to Mexico's law. So we run as sister nonprofits. So we have a full team, 2 lawyers and a media. One of the first things we do is we go out and tell the story. We feel like if there's a safety net, if people know and are watching, then we can kind of put a little bit of a blanket of protection around the victims. So let's bring your story to the media, let's make it public, and then we'll start handling it from a legal perspective after that. And so that's kind of what we've done with different cases. Sometimes they're harder than others because they put people's lives in danger, and so you have to be more quiet about it, until at least it's over, because it's very real.
And what are you trying to do? You're trying to catch whoever did it? Or you?
So for victims, we are helping them through the justice system to go find their own case, to fight their own case through the justice
Right.
system. Through policy and the lobbying, the laws in Mexico and the pressure, the political will to actually do anything about it. If you dive deep, the amount of collusion between the Mexican government and the cartels is absolutely atrocious. There's a 98% impunity rate in Mexico. We have been fighting for 5 years, all hands on deck. There has yet to be one person sentenced for the murder of my sister and her children. And we have done everything we can. And the justice system is archaic. It's slow. We had to fight for 2 years to be recognized as victims. Mexican law does not recognize the families of victims because it's a crime against the state. So they don't even have like jury of your peers. They don't have any of that. So we actually had to fight for 2 years to even have access to the case and to have access to the trials. And so changing all that, we've actually have quite a few different initiatives that have already been presented to the Mexican government to get that change. For example, the right for all victims to attend their case and attend trials. That should be a no-brainer. Let's change this law. Let's amplify sentencing for cartels, recognition of them as terrorists. It's going to take a lot longer in Mexico, but 5 years ago, they wanted to eat us alive. It's been 5 years. Things have gotten so much worse that nowadays people in Mexico are saying, if asking for help makes me a traitor, put me in jail, because we cannot solve this problem alone. It's going to take everybody. It's just that bad. And so I do believe that we've changed the dialogue. Initially, nobody didn't want to consider they were terrorists, didn't want to kind of really delve into the damage that they are doing to society, that the cartels do. Today, it's very much more of an open conversation and the change, but sadly, it's because people have continued to die, it's the reason.
Wow. I not to jump all over, but I wanted to ask this when you were telling your story. Did they ever, like, is there any purpose why they did what they did? I mean, did you ever uncover that? What
So
the threat was? Or?
So when you think of terrorism, I tell people like, well, why does the Taliban blow up a street? Right? What is their purpose? Are they after one person, or do they just bomb a street? Are they after, so when your entire goal is terror, so you can control, it is just terror. So you can, it's called, there's a term in Spanish that they use, it's called calentar plaza. And it means to heat up the zone, right? To heat up the area. Because if you heat up the area, it brings attention on the cartel that you're against. It keeps all the local police in line, don't you dare, you know what we could do,
Got it.
what we can do. So it's like a power move. That's why it's terrorism, because they weren't after our families. There wasn't an involvement. They were absolutely, if there's anything that makes me, they always ask the question, like, do you think God did this because the world needed to wake up and there needed to be a change? And I was like, no, that's too high of a price. No, I don't think God did this. But I do think that God recognizes the evil that exists. When he sees it's going to happen anyways, he says, hopefully they'll be strong enough to make some changes because of what is happening, right? Hopefully. And I think that the very innocence, I mean, Nita was the most humble, innocent person that could exist. Her babies, her children, these women and children. It was so impactful. Because the first move that the cartels did, that the FBI agent that was sent from Mexico City to investigate our case, that eventually was murdered because he refused to tell lies about what was happening, was told, find some dirt on the family so we can make this disappear. That he told us. That's what I was told. And he's like, I can't find any dirt on the family, sorry. And their story is true, and they're fighting for a better Mexico. I don't know what to tell you. And eventually he was murdered a few years ago. And so it's real. It is happening, and that is what they do. These are their tactics. And if I could leave you with one message, is that my sister and her kids, this isn't a one-off. This isn't one horrible thing that happened to one innocent family. This is happening all over Mexico every single day. And it's not always American citizens, so you don't hear about it in the news, but it is happening every single day.
For those that are listening, how do we support this, and how do we support your nonprofit? Is there ways people can get involved and help?
Absolutely. We have working, like I said, we have more cases than we can fund. We have our website, Rhonita Vive. Vive means lives in Spanish, so I think he was going to link them. We're on all the social media, Rhonita Vive Facebook, Rhonita Vive on Instagram, Rhonita Vive on X. You can.
It rolls off your tongue so quick. Say
Yeah.
it slower for us.
Say your name. I want to hear the name again.
I know, Rhonita was my sister, so we always called her Nita, but her name is Rhonita. So it's
Rhonita, Ronita,
Rhonita.
Okay.
And then Vive means lives, so it's Rhonita Vive. And yeah, we went back and forth, and in the end, my dad's like, no, I want it to say her name. And at first I was like, that's the worst marketing thing ever. But every time we go to like the marches and we have to shout, I'm like, no, I actually do like shouting her name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So it works. But yeah, we're, follow us everywhere. You can hear more about our work. We've got a lot going on with these extermination camps right now, just talking to people about this story, but sadly, they're not ending, and the stories will keep being told, and we're just going to do everything we can.
And that completely brings us full circle, because I had no idea. You hear just little whispers of it, but you don't realize the gravity of it until you meet somebody and they've actually gone through it. And this is just one small example of stuff that happens every day, just the horrors and the evil that's going on down there. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that story. I know it can't be easy always reliving that, but you can tell that you're truly inspired, and you're doing everything that you can for your sister. And we're grateful that you came on our show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Why don't you look into Jesus? He got the answer. Work on